So, the goal here, if we're going to get directly to the bottom line, the goal here is to have no goal. I think a line that describes the situation pretty accurately is a presupposed non-existent self seeks liberation for that non-existent self. That statement really points exactly to what's happening. And that's why I say the goal is to have no goal, because if the presupposed non-existent self is seeking liberation for that presupposed non-existent self, its goal is useless. Its goal is unrealistic. Its goal is a dream, an illusion. How can you liberate a non-existent self? I think this is something that's really worth contemplating consistently. Because when you begin to examine it, when you begin to investigate this business of self, and you begin to see that in reality, enlightenment is a farce. It's a ruse. Because who is it that would be enlightened? Who is it that would be enlightened? The problem with having conversations with people about the truth is that the conversation is a pack of lies. And once you engage in the conversation, you've already started to interact with a non-existent self seeking liberation for a non-existent self. And that's why it is a conundrum. That's why it is complex to discuss these things and interact about these things, because the goal of the whole thing is to realize it's not necessary. The goal of the whole thing is to realize the more we talk about it, the farther away from it we're getting. The more we attempt to accomplish something, the farther away from it we're getting. And yet, there's really no way to deal with that. Ramana Maharshi, one of the original teachers of this self-inquiry, which is an investigation into the truth, into the nature of self, conceded when he began to talk to people, it was a concession. Because he realized that anything he could say would be moving away from the truth. In the beginning, he was silent because silence is about as close as you can get to the truth. Why say anything about something that doesn't require anything? You know, why talk about the seeking of the non-existent self, seeking liberation for a non-existent self? Why talk about that? To talk about it as if there is such a self that can be liberated is already to participate in a lie. So the realization is that there is no realization. The liberation is that there is no liberation. You can't liberate somebody who's already free. You can't liberate who you are, because who you are was never not free. Who you are is free, has always been free. So there is no liberation. There is no enlightenment. There is nowhere to go. There is nothing to get. But you see, the problem with that is that the conditioning process that human beings experience is so completely based on the idea that there is time, that there is somewhere to go, completely founded on the idea that there is something to get, completely founded idea on the idea that what you are exists in time. You know, you could say that who you actually are doesn't exist. Who you actually are doesn't even exist. Right? Because something that exists has to exist in time, doesn't it? Yeah, that's what science says. Something that exists has to exist in time. And you don't exist in time. What you discover when you discover that there's nothing to discover, you know, when you realize there's nothing to realize, when you start to experience yourself, which you never actually stopped doing, it becomes evident that you're a verb, that you're happening. You're what's happening. And what's happening doesn't exist in time. It is existing in the moment, in the now. But even to say that it's the now is saying too much. Because to say that it's the now already infers that there's something other than the now. You know, that to say that the present moment is real already infers that there's something other than the present moment. These are the things that present the challenge here. So this is why you hear some of the traditional teachers say, just shut up, you know, just stop the search. Because all we're dealing with here is to stop doing something that isn't going anywhere. All we're doing here is to stop doing something that isn't going anywhere. The problem with that is that it seems like you can't stop. And the reason it seems like you can't stop is because as long as we are giving attention, as long as our attention is being taken by the mental process, and the mental process is running a program that says the presupposed non-existent self exists. That's what the thought process is doing. It's saying the presupposed non-existent self exists. It exists because I think it exists. It exists because the thought process, the voice in your head speaks from the presumption that it's real and that it's real and you're real. So it speaks from there. It speaks as you. It speaks as you. This is one of the reasons that it's difficult to be aware consistently that the voice in your head isn't you, because it speaks as you, and you're so conditioned and so it has become such a habit to relate to it as it speaks as you, that it's very difficult to not keep falling into that it speaks of you. And when you fall into that it speaks as you, you take on that voice as your identity. This is such a habit, this is so automatic and so mechanical, that when we talk, when we interact, we speak from there. We speak from there. And that's why the less said, the better when it comes to this. But then, you know, just as Ramana Maharshi discovered, you can recognize, you can understand that the less said, the better. But then what happens is you have people who want to talk about it, who find themselves lost, who find themselves unable to comprehend or understand silence, How can silence make any difference? Because we are conditioned for action. We're conditioned for doing. We're conditioned to deal with things through thinking. So this whole business of being who we are is so easy and so simple and so not required and so unnecessary to think about that we find ourselves at a loss, you know, what to do. Well, nothing to do. When we practice meditation and we practice moving our attention from thinking to the breath, the idea is to then notice awareness of the breath. And that offers the possibility and the opportunity to simply recognize the fact that nothing needs to be done here. The presupposed non-existent self seeking liberation for the non-existent self. That statement is worth contemplating. See, the problem is, as I've said before when I was talking about the enso, the problem is that even when you realize it, of course there's nothing to realize. Even when you realize there's nothing to realize, so you stop trying to realize something, right? There's still this in the worldness. You know, Ramana Maharshi, he is considered somebody who knew who he was. He was being who he was, right? But that's still that he didn't disappear, you know. He still manifested in form, and he still had to eat food, you know. He still was in the world, right? And that's the trick, you see, because before what you realize that doesn't need to be realized is realized, before you realize what doesn't need to be realized is realized, you're in the process of either realizing that or living in the ignorant state in which you don't yet recognize there's anything to realize. But when you have the realization that's not necessary, when you are who you are, you're still in the same situation you were in before the whole thing began. The only difference is you're not actually in the situation you were in before the whole thing began, because now it's like, if you're familiar with that analogy that Rupert uses, he considers his best metaphor, and I can see why, it is excellent. The metaphor of King Lear and John Smith, you know, if you're familiar with that, it's a very useful metaphor to use, right? Because the difference after you realize what there was that didn't need to be realized is that you will continue in the play, you see. You'll continue in the play, in the drama. You'll continue in the drama, and you'll continue to be King Lear, but you won't be King Lear. Do you see the difference? Because a great actor, if a great actor was so completely identified with the role they were playing, they would have to go to a locked ward after the play, you see. So a great actor, the real pinnacle, the real realization of being a great actor is to, on the one hand, be totally in the world of King Lear, be experiencing being King Lear, and at the very same time know you're not King Lear. So you could actually cry when King Lear cries. You could be angry when King Lear's angry. You could participate in the story that exists in the world of King Lear. And all the while, you would know that you were not King Lear. And because you knew that you were not King Lear, you could enjoy being the actor. Do you understand? An actor can enjoy being, if an actor actually turned into the role they were playing, who would want to do that? You know, who would want to actually experience themselves as King Lear and not know they were acting? That would be horrible. That would be a horrible experience. Huh? What's that?
That's what we're living.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that's a good point. What most human beings are experiencing is being an actor in a dramatic story that has a tragic ending, and they don't know it's not true. They're stuck in the role, and they don't know it's not true. So because they're stuck in the role and they don't know it's not true, within that drama, within that story, within those circumstances is what they have to work with to try and get it to work. King Lear, in the story of King Lear, in the circumstances King Lear experienced, that's what he had to work with to get it to work. That's what he had to work with to try and have life produce satisfaction, happiness, and well-being. Not a good situation, right? We here in this reality that we share, it's ironic because on the one hand, we have more freedom and more comfort. Your basic needs are being met. You're not starving. You don't have to worry about food, right? You don't have to worry about safety, generally speaking. You don't have to worry about shelter. So you're in the best position. People in highly developed countries, especially this country, in spite of the fact that there's so much craziness going on, you're still in a superior position in the world in terms of the possibility that you have to give energy to this realization, where so many other people in the world don't have that freedom, don't have that opportunity. They're preoccupied with whether they're going to have food. They're preoccupied with whether they're going to stay alive. If you live in Central America, these people that go through all these things to try and get into this country are doing that because they're afraid that they're going to be killed in their country. We don't think about that. We're only thinking about what the implications in terms of how to deal with the fact that so many of them are trying to come into the country. And even in our everyday lives, we don't have a perspective that's realistic. We worry about petty bullshit, right? We worry about petty bullshit. It's we're totally neurotic, right? And because we're preoccupied with petty bullshit and paying attention to the wrong things, we continue to suffer in spite of the fact that we have the best situation to experience well-being and not suffering. Yeah, the better you have it, the more lost you are, because you think that it's working. You think that that who you think you are is succeeding, right? So that has you be more. That's why, that's that statement: the meek shall inherit the earth. Well, they're in the best position to inherit the earth because they're not presuming anything. The worst aspect of who people are, especially the people that are in the richest people, the people that are in the most secure positions, the people that have most of their needs handled and so forth, is that supports the idea that they are who they think they are. And so, in a sense, that makes it harder for them. It's harder for people that have been successful in life to recognize the truth. Even though if they pay attention, they will see that their lack of happiness, or their lack of really feeling at ease and at home in life and enjoying the experience of being alive, if they paid attention to that, they would realize. But it's hard to pay attention to that when you have everything you want, when you have all the money and when you have all the fame and so forth. Probably the biggest possibility of realizing something when you're in that situation is how terrified you are of losing it. You know, if you're a beauty queen and all of your worth and your value is attached to your appearance, then you're terrified about losing it. Or you're terrified about trusting anybody to love you because you don't believe they could really love you, they're just loving your body. So, but you're here. You're here. So, or whether you're here in person or you're listening to this video, it means that for whatever reason, however it is the case, that somehow that you have recognized something here. You've recognized some possibility. And because that's the case, if you intend to fulfill on this possibility, you have to be willing to accept the idea that this possibility it has already been realized. It's already the case. So everything that you've done in the world that you have been living in to accomplish something is not going to work here. What's going to work here is something that is very radically different than all of that, and that's just to allow what's already the case to be the case. To understand that the presupposed non-existent self need not seek liberation for itself because there is no such thing. Liberation is not real. There is no liberation. How can you liberate somebody who's free? Okay, I think that's enough.